questions that are...
Was philosophy always meant to be practically applicable, or is that some... Was philosophy always meant to be practically applicable, or is that some modern reinterpretation?
That's a Joe question.
Oh, well, I mean, I suppose one of the differences between, like, very broadly speaking, between something like ancient Greek philosophy, say, and the way that we conceive of philosophy today is that, philosophy today is largely thought of in terms of different fields. You've got your kind of epistemologists who discuss questions like, what is knowledge, and, more importantly, how do we attain knowledge? What are the kinds of systems and processes that produce reliable knowledge, that kind of stuff. And then there are kind of ethicists talking about, what is the good life? Vitally important question. Also, what are the right things to do? And then you've got kind of logicians talking about, you do a lot of proofs and try to often model ordinary things using formal mathematical or at least semi-mathematical systems. You've got philosophers of language, philosophers of science, but certainly in the ancient world, these weren't as differentiated certainly as they are today. And so, Aristotle wrote different treatises on these different topics, but even in his philosophy, everything is so interlinked. And if you go, back before Aristotle, it's very, very hard to separate these. So, for example, the Stoics, although, in kind of popular discourse around Stoicism today, we talk a lot about Stoic ethics. The Stoics thought that their ethics fell out of their metaphysics and their logic, which was their word for what we would call today things like logic and epistemology. And so I think that's one major difference. In terms of practicality, I mean, a lot of ancient philosophy is incredibly practical. These are, especially, the one of the paramount questions that's asked by almost every ancient philosopher is, how to live a good life. The first philosopher received wisdom is Thales. He's a kind of ancient Greek philosopher. But before that, there are lots of we have scraps of like ancient Egyptian philosophies and things like that. And they're often concerned with, what's the good life? How do we live it? I think philosophy is eminently practical. I also think, maybe this is just my own bias showing. I think that today philosophy at its best is often very practical.
How has something gone awry? Is there some sense that modern philosophy, a lot of that is kind of like string theory in physics, where there's not much progress being made in quite the same way for people's practical applicability?
We're trying to do the ethics without the metaphysics. As Joe just said, like a lot of these ancient philosophers in particular are remembered for their ethical teachings. The Stoics, you might know what a Stoic is. It's someone who sort of is resistant to suffering and pleasure and is sort of neutral. But why? Because of their metaphysics, because of what they believed was true about the world. Same thing with Epicureanism. People might know that Epicurus, for example, thought that you shouldn't worry about death. Like death is nothing to us. He said literally nothing to us, because when you're alive, it's not with you. And when it's with you, there's no you. That stems out of the Epicurean tradition of materialism. They were staunch materialists. They believed that everything, including the human soul, was made up of matter. So that when that goes, there's nothing left. And it seems like they really thought that these metaphysical commitments were what led to these ethical commitments. And so if all you have are the ethical commitments now, that there isn't really a way to make progress, because ethics is kind of conjectural if it doesn't have a metaphysical grounding. It's just like, what feels like it works, what feels like it vibes with your worldview. I mean, I think a lot of people approach these philosophies now. They'll look at Stoicism and Epicureanism, utilitarianism, emotivism, and they'll sort of think, which of these do I like? Yeah, that makes sense to me. And they sort of adopt it. So all that's really being done by reading these philosophies is some ancient guy elucidating something you already kind of believe. So you're not going to make much progress in terms of actually developing your thought unless you believe something new that's true about the world that will cause you to commit to something else. You know what I mean? So it's like, if you ask someone what Stoicism is on the street, or indeed in a podcast, they would list 50 different things before they told you anything about their metaphysical claims, about what they actually thought the world was made of. It'd all be about, how to live your life.
Go ahead.
In Stoics, for the kind of one of the reasons why Stoics are so big on acceptance and accepting things that happen to you, and accepting the kind of state of the world in kind of very, very broad strokes, is that the Stoics were big believers in what today we would recognize as something like divine providence. They had a real kind of teleological view of reality. So they thought that the universe was inherently rational, inherently reasonable. And as a result, this, whatever is happening, is in accordance with the rational will of the universe. So there's kind of, it's sort of a, in modern Stoicism, people tend not to have that assumption baked in. But this is a huge part of ancient Stoicism. And it's actually interesting to the kind of, we see, we talking about kind of how things get stripped away over time. Even in the difference between Greek and Roman Stoicism, you already see less emphasis placed on Stoic logic, for example. Chrysippus, I have no idea if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but he wrote, reams and reams of parchment on Stoic logical systems. And, you don't even see that in my favorite Stoic philosopher, Epictetus. He's not that concerned with Stoic logic. And I think, he's the kind of the goat of Roman Stoicism. And, so it's not like a necessarily just a modern thing of this, of stripping back aspects of philosophies. But of course, there is an argument to be made that this is part of what development consists of. Although I do think it's sometimes worth going back and revisiting some of the assumptions that maybe we ought to reconsider. Yeah.
Is it fair to say? Well, I guess at least for.
Hold on. ¿Qué está la radio? ¿Cómo la apago? What is interior? HUD camera. Nope. Walk mode, photo mode. Activate. World map. 37. ¿Qué quedamos que era este package? 35, so aquí va a ser 34. 34. Cruise control. A ver. Vamos a poner menú aquí. Ahora aquí, audio player R. Enable push to talk. Audio player pause play. Audio player R. A ver. How do I turn it off though? A ver. Bueno. Oh. Es que no, como que no me gusta. I do wanna pause it, play, ¿cómo era? Environment, aquí no conozco aquí. No, tampoco. Play sound, radio volume, music volume. at E38. Is there a P? Audio player. Silence. Oh. What is
For me, good avatar.
I know, remember, I have to get in the mood. Vamos a acercar esto. Ok. Ahí. Y el mapa. ¿Cómo vamos? We're taking E34 hasta dar vuelta. Acá, which is what? Edinburgh. Después del trébol. Okay. Hold on. Preset, ahí voy. Ahí está.
path to the layperson.
Uh-huh.
When you think about development, you think about sort of refining over time, about becoming sort of more accurate, more detailed, seeing things with a higher resolution. How fair is it to say that modern philosophy is more sort of concerned with intellectual masturbation than it is teaching people fundamental questions about themselves and the world?
Very fair indeed. I think that philosophy doesn't develop in the way that something like physics does. The idea with something like physics is that you're born into a world with a particular understanding, you develop that understanding, you learn new things, you maybe dig a bit further down into an atom and you find out what it's made of, and then you have children, and you tell those children as a starting point, this is what atoms are made of, and then they're off to the races trying to go even further. Philosophy, I don't think quite works in the same way. You might disagree with this, I don't know. I think it's, instead of something which you sort of go from ignorance to knowledge over the course of 20 generations, you go from ignorance to knowledge over the course of one generation, and everybody has to sort of start afresh. Which is why you find that these ancient philosophers and early modern philosophers and modern philosophers and guaranteed future philosophers too are all essentially saying the same thing. You know, if you read Epicurean philosophy, it's kind of very similar to utilitarianism. It's got a very sort of similar thread. At the very least, it seems to be based on similar intuitions. So you might sort of think that philosophy is a bit stagnant, that it hasn't actually progressed anywhere, but it's maybe not kind of what it's supposed to do. You know, you're supposed to do that throughout your own life. You know?
Somebody asked ChatGPT what it's like to be itself. I imagine you've probably done this. You've done everything with ChatGPT. Everything within reason.
Not everything.
Everything within reason.
Within reason.
Yeah.
There we go.
Subscribe.
He said it.
And one of the things that it said was, imagine basically every time that you had a conversation, your memory of the last one was wiped. So each new context window is a brand new. So it makes me think about what you're talking about here. This generation needs to rediscover, or it tries to answer the same questions over and over and over again.
Because the important stuff with philosophy is probably the way that it allows you to live a good life, or a life that you see fit, or to console you in some regard. And that is something that will happen over the course of an individual life. I would take what ChatGPT says with a pinch of salt, because, of course, it probably is not in fact conscious. But it does give us an interesting sort of in for thinking about what it might be like to be such a creature. What would it be like not only to have your memory wiped every time you started a new day or conversation, but also to kind of be one thing with many avatars. You know, like ChatGPT is one thing. We're speaking about it as one entity, but you could have a conversation on your phone. I could have a conversation on my phone with it. And it's this sort of one thing, but having two distinct and separable. And I think that a lot of philosophies kind of view human beings in the same way. You know, this is how an ancient Indian philosopher, like who's reading or indeed composing the Upanishads, might think about human consciousness. That it's sort of all one consciousness, that somehow the localizing of individual selves is kind of an illusion. It's all just sort of one big thing, and we're probably somehow restricted in the sense that we have our like memories and our localized experiences, but if we knew the truth, if we could somehow step outside of that, we'd recognize that we're all actually just one big thing. So I imagine if ChatGPT was conscious, it would probably be a little bit like that. It would be this sort of illusory individuation across different computers and things, which is what a lot of philosophers think is going on in human beings.
It's interesting to talk about kind of, because there are clearly elements to how people kind of go on their own, have to wrestle with the questions of what makes a good life for themselves. I do have a thing that, we can chart progress in certain philosophical problems, and it's more nebulous than others. One of philosophy's historic successes is just creating lots of new fields. So of course, something like
philosophers are good at making jobs for philosophers.
Philosophers are good at making jobs for other academics. So like originally maths was inseparable from philosophy, and then that becomes its own field of study. And physics is originally rolled into philosophy, and it becomes its own field of study. Economics is another one that stems from philosophy. I mean, something like psychoanalytic theory or psychology. This comes from partly from Freud. Freud is, although he denies ever reading Nietzsche, he's theories are so incredibly influenced by Nietzsche and by earlier philosophical thinkers. So I do think that it's very easy to hide some of philosophy's successes, partly because quite a lot of the time they're hidden away, they're handed off to other fields. You know, I think this is a point that Bertrand Russell made, was this idea that, you know, one of the measures of philosophy's efficacy is just in giving birth to other fields. You know, linguistics is another one. You know,
very sort of philanthropic field in that way.
You could also argue that it's taking credit for other people's work further down the line. But,
Okay, yeah.
but, you know, that's one
That
way
does
to
sound
look
like
at it.
Alex, actually. So you mentioned Stoicism there. Are there some ancient schools that you think have been most unfairly ignored? You know, if you were to ask any person about, give me some ancient schools of philosophy, Stoicism would be up top. Maybe they'd think Buddhism, Taoism or something. They go, oh, I'm going to be like real, a different approach to this. I'm going to go to the other side of the planet.
Yeah.
But beyond that, we're probably really bouncing off the limit of most people's knowledge. Are there some schools that you think you should have got a little bit more time at the table?
I think, well, yeah, I mean, you're quite right to point out that certainly any Western thinker is probably going to have neglected Eastern philosophy to a significant degree. But even within so-called Western thought, yeah, I suppose one thing that jumped out at me while you were speaking is not so much a school but an idea, which is like, I've been thinking a lot about like Aristotelian metaphysics, so from Aristotle, right? And when I ask people about cause and effect, like what causes particular things to occur, Aristotle famously, one of the foundational like doctrines of his metaphysics is that there are 4 kinds of causation that go into anything. Like, why is this beautiful and tasty can of Newtonic on the table? Well, it's got 4 different kinds of explanations. There is its formal cause, which is sort of the shape that it takes. There's its material cause, which is the stuff that it's made out of, right? We don't think of the stuff that's made out of, strictly speaking, as a cause, but it's clearly part of the causal story that puts this on the table. There is the efficient cause, which is like, who actually made it, right? You put this together, somebody put it in a can, I put it on the table. And finally, there is the final cause, which is what it was done for, what it's going towards, the teleological cause. In the modern era, we essentially, when we talk about causation, we just talk about the efficient cause. If I say, like, why is that on the table? And you say, well, because I put it there, question is answered. But I think that neglects a lot of really important questions about like the nature of the thing itself, why it's there in that particular time slice, taking that shape with that particular form. I think we neglect that. And I think that modern science is lacking in that it only seems to concern itself ultimately with efficient causes and maybe a little bit of the material cause too. In that, like, if you ask a scientist in a laboratory, you know, why is that shuttle like flying and escaping the atmosphere? They'll say, oh, because it has an escape velocity and the thrust of the rockets. But if you ask the same scientist at the pub, they'll say, because we wanted to go to the moon. And suddenly they become an Aristotelian again. And I think that the influence of these other kinds of causation isn't really there. The only other thing that came to mind is potentially the pre-Socratics. You know, I mean, and Joe already said that the sort of first philosopher, as it were, was Thales. But people might have thought when he went to say that, well, the first philosopher that people generally think of is Socrates. If you ask somebody who was the first philosopher, they'll say Socrates. But Socrates didn't just spring up ex nihilo. You know, he's working and him and Aristotle and Plato, they're working sometimes in response to, but certainly after and contemporary with other thinkers too, who a lot of the time their ideas just, because they weren't particularly popular or didn't win the war of ideas, we don't even know about. Parmenides didn't think that change could occur. In fact, you've heard of Zeno's paradoxes. So Zeno had these wonderful paradoxes of motion where, like, I can't clap my hands because first I'd have to half the distance, then half the distance, then half the distance. And you can't complete an infinite series of tasks, so I can't clap my hands. Everybody knows about Zeno's paradoxes, but do they know that the reason he came up with them is because he was following in the school of Parmenides, who believed that change was literally impossible, and these were paradoxes which were kind of supposed to demonstrate the paradoxical nature of change for that reason. Like, again, we've got the conclusion, but we haven't got the working. And sometimes the working is the most interesting stuff, you know?
I really concur with the kind of neglect of aspects of Aristotle's thought. I mean, especially really with regards to something like Aristotle's Ethics. You know, Aristotle's book, The Nicomachean Ethics, is, I would say, you know, even after over 2,000 years, the most useful book of philosophy for anyone to read. I would say, you know, go on and get yourself a copy. They're great. There are some excellent translations. And the most recent Penguin one is an excellent translation. And Aristotle's Ethics is, I think, one of its real strengths is that it's incredibly realistic. So he's very, very concerned with virtues. But as opposed to, say, someone like certain Stoic thinkers and also the Cynics, Aristotle denies that virtue is sufficient for a good or flourishing life. He's very, he's very good at getting down to brass tacks. You know, kind of at one point during the Nicomachean Ethics, he basically says, you know, like, there is no philosophy that's going to make you happy on the rack. You know, that you always need certain, like, minimal levels of your physical needs fulfilled in order to just, like, calm down the bestial part of you that recognizes that you need to eat and breathe and sleep in order to live. And I think that, you know, and again, Aristotle has a number of incredibly, I think still incredibly insightful ethical insights that sometimes sound obvious when you say them out loud, but we're talking before we started filming about the idea that actually sometimes very, very obvious things bear repeating because we just forget them very, very easily. I mean, this is, again, a point that Tolstoy made where he talked about that idea of loving your neighbor as yourself. Tolstoy basically says, yeah, like, that sounds trite, but have we ever got round to doing that? He argues that we haven't, and I probably concur. And one of Aristotle's ideas here is I'll just focus on two. One of them is the idea of a golden mean. So his idea that virtue lies between the poles of two vices. You know, being brave is in between being cowardly and being reckless. Being generous is in between being, you know, profligate and being miserly. And you know, he has, and I think that's a very useful framework. You know, it sounds, you know, almost like common sense when you say it out loud, but actually attempting to think in these terms can be incredibly useful. And the other thing that Aristotle really, that I'm so bullish on, with regards to Aristotle, is he's got an incredibly well worked out theory of friendship. It's in two books, book 8 and 9 of the Nicomachean Ethics, and it's some of the best writing on friendship I think there's ever been. Aristotle, in some ways, following in the footsteps of some previous thinkers, like Epicurus was a very, very big fan of friendship. Actually, I'm getting my timelines confused there. But either way, you know, Aristotle is incredibly, he thinks that having a group of friends, and moreover, friends that that are friendships of virtue. So friends that you're not just there because you enjoy their company. You're not just there because you know they have something that you want and you're trying to get at. You know, in the way that someone might schmooze up to their boss, or just you're friends with somebody, but simply because you enjoy their company. These are friends who are sort of getting together in order to make one another more virtuous, and moreover, hold like duties and loyalties to one another. You know, Aristotle thinks that these are enormously contributive factors to your life. You owe them things. You know, this is I think can be a real antidote to the sort of, you know, nobody owes anyone anything anymore. You know, that kind of that approach to life, which I think is sort of can be very unhelpfully individualistic. And yeah, I think that sometimes stepping into the footsteps of an ancient thinker like Aristotle is one way to sort of, you know, get a bit of distance from the way that we might currently live. And I think that books 8 and 9 of the Nicomachean Ethics, where he so clearly thinks, you know, groups of friends, this is, you know, halfway to the good life, effectively, is an insight that we could really use. You know, everyone thinks friendship is important, right? It's very easy to say, but like culturally, we place significantly less emphasis on friendship than at almost any other point in Western history. This is like, you know, think about I don't know if you know ever read through sort of like letters from the World Wars or from like the Crimean Wars or you know, even the Napoleonic Wars. These are people writing to their friends, and the way that they talk about their friends is amazing. It's sort
more
of passionate and sort of vulnerable, and more. It's just very clear that friendship is a huge part of the way that they organize their lives. You know, like we, you know, the kind of standard way of, I suppose, of organizing your adult life now is to organize it around a romantic partner. And I think there's an awful lot to be said for romance. I just think that there's also an awful lot to be said for friendship, and it very much gets overshadowed. Like, when was the last time, or if we were to compare the amount of great films that are about, you know, two people getting together versus two great friends. I mean, you know, films about two great friends, what, like Bill and Ted? You know,
Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle.
Harold and Kumar Got the Munchies. You know, these are, I mean, great films all. But, you know, it's completely outmoded. And I think you know, that's why I'm very bullish on Aristotle. Books 8 and 9 of the Nicomachean Ethics.
Yeah, I wonder what it is about Stoicism. I guess just very good PR and branding kind of suits the modern world, a time when people are a little bit lost, are unsure.
Yeah, it's. I've never been super attracted to it on that level. It's really popular as I guess kind of a means of consolation and way of sort of structuring your life. But I don't know. I guess people who are suffering are always looking for alleviation from that suffering, and traditionally it's come with a lot of metaphysical baggage, be that religious or be it not. And I suppose it offers people a way of seemingly achieving that without the metaphysical baggage.
Good news, AG1 just released their next-gen formula. It is a more advanced, clinically backed version of the product that I've been drinking every day for years. So you still get the same one-scoop ritual, but now with an even more thoughtful formulation, flavor, and 4 clinical trials behind it. AG1 has been evolving since 2010, continuously improving alongside the latest research, and AG1 Next Gen is the result clinically shown to help fill common nutrient gaps and support gut health, even in people who already eat well. In one study, it boosted healthy bacteria in the gut by 10 times. And if you're still unsure, they've got a 90-day money-back guarantee, so you can buy it and try it for 3 months. If you don't like it, they'll give you your money back. Right now, you can get a year's free supply of vitamin D3, K2, and 5 free AG1 travel packs, plus the 90-day money-back guarantee by going to the link in the description below, or heading to drinkag1.com/modern wisdom. That's drinkag1.com/modern wisdom. You are somebody who tried nihilism as a life philosophy.
Yes, I suppose. Look, the thing, nihilism, man,
Here we go, bull case for nihilism.
Nihilism is often thought of as a synonym for all things depressing and upsetting, and in many cases it is. But nihilism just means there's sort of no purpose to it all. There's no... It's a difficult thing to define in analytic terms. That's why it's generally in the wheelhouse of like existential philosophers who tell stories to try and sort of grasp at a feeling. But in theory, you know, if it's not just that you're suffering. You could be suffering but not be a nihilist. It's if you're suffering, and suffering all the more because you think you're suffering without reason. That makes you a nihilist. But I think you could just as easily be having a wonderful time and think, there is no rhyme or reason to this. I'm having a great time, but there's absolutely no purpose to this. And you'd still be a nihilist because you think that there's no purpose behind it all. But it doesn't mean you have to have a bad time doing so. So I think it is worth, if you are somebody who wants to toy with the idea that there is no meaning, like, try it on. See how it fits. That's what you've got to do with all philosophies, you know? If something seems like it sort of chimes with you a little bit, like, live in accordance with it for like a week, and a lot of the time it will be way too hard, but sometimes it will teach you something.
There's a lot of memes about philosophy making people depressed.
Yeah.
That the more that you learn, the worse that you see the world. What's the darkest philosophies that you guys have been exposed to?
Turan?
I mean, I love Turan. I think that Turan is an incredibly underrated kind of Romanian stroke French. Wrote lots of his work in French, but was Romanian, kind of adopted France in his later years.
Well, that'll make you depressed straight off the bat.
Well, potentially. And Turan...
Emile Turan.
Yes, Emile Turan. Writes these incredibly pessimistic tracts of philosophy. You know, one's called The Trouble with Being Born, and others called A Short History of Decay. And it is kind of incredibly...
Love him already.
His first book...
You sure he's not British?
Well, it's I don't know if it's just because I'm British that it kind of... I like it so much. You know, his first book is called On the Heights of Despair. It's, you know, truly melodramatic.
Sanguine shit, yeah.
One of the things that I find very interesting about philosophies that are supposedly dark, and I'm specifically thinking of the pessimistic philosophies here, people like Schopenhauer and Turan, maybe to a lesser extent someone like Philip Mainlander. It's... I know, this is something I think Turan is so good at, is that oftentimes when you're reading him, he's very good at subtly shifting the scope. So that you're reading him and, you know, he's complaining about life. You know, his view on life is far more pessimistic than mine. His view on life is this kind of the characteristic property of life is suffering for a variety of reasons. But he occasionally just this kind of dark pessimistic outlook breaks through into a kind of natural lightheartedness that I think is absolutely amazing. So one of the things that is interesting, I say, about reading a pessimistic philosopher is that if, and I think that nihilism to a certain extent shares this, provided that it's kind of framed in a certain way, is that if, you know, you're not expecting things to go very well, and if you think the characteristic property of the world is meaningless suffering, well then, to a certain extent, like, the stakes are kind of lower. It's very similar, I suppose, to that advice that Seneca gave in one of his letters, which is to kind of imagine how things are going to go horribly wrong, so that you feel much better when it comes to it.
Low expectations.
Yes, yeah. And I think that on a kind of existential level, reading an incredibly darkly pessimistic philosopher, sort of, as I say, there is sometimes a moment where it breaks through. I suppose the only way I could kind of try and contextualize this is like, have you ever had an astonishingly bad day, just like a comedically bad day? And I do mean like comedic, and you get to like 5 o'clock and you've been mugged 7 times, and a car drives by and it kicks up a puddle of dog shit over your nice suit or whatever, and you can't help but just laugh. Because at that point it's like, oh wow, like this has become funny, and I think that's something that Turan is very, very good at, and that's why I often talk about him as one of the darkest philosophers of all time. He's also one of the funniest, one of the few philosophers where you can read him and laugh out loud.
It is hilarious that suffering is dose dependent in that way.
Yeah.
Like your response to it, a U-shaped curve. It's like, too little, everything's probably okay. A bit, oh god, this sucks. And then too much, it's okay again.
It was at least a frivolity, right? And that makes it livable. I do think sometimes the more pessimistic philosophers can be a little bit self-indulgent. It's a bit sort of, woe is me, because, I don't know.
How sophisticated my thoughts,
yeah,
how deep my engagement with the world is.
When actually you just like, you got dumped by your girlfriend and now you're writing about how terrible life is.
I mean, look, I asked Joe this the last time that we sat down. I often think philosophy is just clever branding for depressive thoughts.
It often is, but it's also often just clever branding for like any kind of thought. I think it's like you literally just have a thought and you try to systematize it, right? This is why the greatest philosophers, another thing we said before we started, tell you something you already know. If you open Wittgenstein's Tractus, the first line of the introduction is something like, I don't think this book will be useful except to anybody who's already like in agreement with the things that it says. It's just supposed to be sort of elucidating an idea. And so, yeah, a lot of the time it is just sort of feeling out a vibe, finding someone who puts it into good words, and saying, "Oh, I think that person's very smart."
That resonates with me. I feel less alone.
By the way, is why when people ask me for like a recommendation of what philosophy to read or something, if someone says, where should I start with philosophy, you might be tempted to say, "Okay, well, let's start with Plato, read about Socrates and Aristotle, then do a bit of existentialist philosophy." I just tell people just literally read what you've heard of. And the reason for that is because these people will have come up in contexts that are relevant to you or of interest to you, right? So if you've heard Nietzsche mentioned a bunch of times because you're a big Jordan Peterson fan, like if you like Jordan Peterson, and Jordan Peterson obviously likes Nietzsche quite a lot, finds a lot of use in him, you're probably going to find some use in him. Whereas if you just randomly pick one of the great philosophers, like if you just pick up Sartre, as I did the other day, I told you this, and read Existentialism as a Humanism and think, this is complete nonsense, that was a complete waste of time. Because you're not going to resonate with it. It's not going to, strictly speaking, convince you, unless I think you've already got sort of one foot in the boat. I did think on the pessimistic philosophers, or you said the darkest philosophers, which doesn't necessarily mean pessimistic, right?
Dark philosophy, pessimistic philosophy, whatever.
I think Schopenhauer comes to mind. He's writing his On the Sufferings of the World. That's your sort of indulgent pessimist. I think he had trouble with women for some of his life, and he's got this infamous essay on women, which would read like a comedy. In fact, one version of his essays I have in the introduction, or the preface, the translator says, by the way, the essay on women isn't a joke. He's not being sarcastic. This is what he actually thought. He comes to me.
It's an irony disclaimer.
Yeah. So, in order to sort of avoid that, I think that a good example of a potentially non-self-indulgent pessimistic philosophy that seems genuinely just philosophical might be something like antinatalism. The view that it is immoral to have children. David Benatar is the sort of superstar of antinatalism. He wrote a book called Better Never to Have Been, which sounds like one of these sort of, I'm about to write about how terrible life is, I wish I was never born. But it's not. It's like, philosophically speaking, he tries to make a case that it's just better for no one to be born. Even if their life is filled with more pleasure than suffering, he thinks that it's still immoral to bring them into existence. It's an interesting take.
We had a debate about this 5 years ago in the Barbican.
That sounds about right, yeah. When we first met.
Like canteen
at
the Barbican, and we were having the conversation, and people came, tried to be social, listened for 5 minutes, and then left. And there was just this sort of steady cycle of people coming and going. This doesn't sound very nice at all. So yeah, Benatar actually probably does fit.
A good example of why you might find it dark. I mean, I call it dark if you like. I mean, for an antinatalist, they'll say, no, the darkness is that you're unconsensually bringing people into suffering. That's the dark
representation
thing.
of.
But in terms of how it's perceived, I think that as far as pessimism goes, the idea that it's immoral to have children. I mean, you've heard of like the pro-life and the pro-choice crowd. Benatar and his crew are like anti-life. Like it's like this sort of third option that everybody forgets about. He's got some wonderful sort of little tidbits in there. He takes a divergence into the philosophy of disability for a time, sort of making a case that in principle we are all disabled in some philosophical sense.
How so? Are we all disabled?
It's been a while since I've read it, but I think he's sort of imagined. So one way of thinking about this would be like, imagine if everybody whose legs worked suddenly just died, and the only people left on planet Earth don't have functioning legs. Maybe not instantly, because people would have memory, but after not very long, it just wouldn't be considered a disability to not have legs, because that's just how everybody is. And Benatar sort of imagines, in principle, the things that we could have that we don't, which means that in principle we are disabled in the same way. We just
can't fly.
So there are all kinds of sufferings that come about in our life, like having to climb the stairs, which we don't even notice as sufferings. And if you add all of these up, they become pretty significant. It's a bit of a trip, but really interesting, and I think probably dark.
The other thing that's quite nice about Benatar, I said it was sort of dry earlier, and I did mean that as a compliment. Sorry, it's
to like frilly.
Yes, is that Benatar is very. He gives a very logical argument. As in, there I would say there are problems with the argument, but as in like it's very clearly laid out in a way that quite a lot of pessimistic philosophers write in sort of semi-poetry. Benatar, if you're a hardcore analytic fan, he's probably the pessimist you're going to enjoy.
Seems that way, I suppose. He
spoke to him, right?
I did. I had him on my show. He doesn't show his
Pseudonymous.
face. Yeah, he doesn't. I actually don't know if he uses his real name, but he doesn't show his face. So there is also that added element that he doesn't want to be seen.
So he's the sleep token of the philosophy world.
Oh, are they the mask-wearing Slipknot?
Yeah, Joe, don't make that face.
No, sorry, no. I don't.
It's very, very cool, very popular. But this, when you guys start telling me about, Anistatis of ancient Scythia, and I go, oh yeah, and I need to nod along like this. This is your turn.
Oh yeah.
Okay, there we are. Thank you. Very good.
What's the philosophy of sleep token?
If you go on the Reddit, really deep, really, really, really deep. The lore goes hard.
The lore goes hard on many subreddits. I have a subreddit too, which has some interesting laws of its own.
I've seen them.
I think. Oh yeah,
I've seen them. Yeah, you've got canon.
Yeah, apparently so.
Okay, so Benatar's got this. I remember his whole thing is this balance between suffering and pleasure.
Yeah.
Is that even a tiny microcosm of suffering is so great that it outweighs any amount of pleasure.
He calls it like an asymmetry argument between pleasure and pain. So
I've just pulled that out of a 5.5-year-old canteen conversation.
I've got a memory on you.
Thank you. I mean,
this is
if
why
that's
you made it so
not
far.
a great advert for a tasty drink,
yes,
0 calorie,
some 3 million subscribers later.
Modern wisdom. I don't know what it is. Come on.
And he remembers. I think when a lot of people would consider, is life worth living, one crude way of working it out is adding up the pleasure, minusing the pain, and sort of seeing what you're left over with. Is it worth living overall? Benatar thinks that, crucially, before you exist, the potential pleasure that you might experience if you come into existence doesn't matter one jot. It's literally irrelevant. But the potential pain that you would avoid does matter. And he tries to prove this through some sort of intuitive thought experiments. For example, there are no conscious beings on Mars, right? We don't really think that it's a bad thing that all this pleasure that could be on Mars is being missed out on. We don't think, what a tragedy that all of the potential pleasure that could exist on Mars isn't actually happening. But we might think that it is a good thing that there's no suffering up there. And some people hear that kind of example and go, yeah, that makes sense. Some people go, well, no, I am sad that there's no pleasure on Mars. It's sort of an intuitive thing. He also, one other way of thinking about this, at least for the imbalance, might be a question, which is, would you take 5 minutes of the worst imaginable, conceivable suffering that you could experience if afterwards you got to have 5 minutes of the best possible bliss? I mean, I don't know what you guys would do. You wouldn't take it?
No, thank you.
I don't think I'd take 5 minutes of the best possible bliss anyway. The rest of your life. The rest of your life, will you just
expectation?
You just be complete. You just feel empty.
Well, I mean, that's another asymmetry.
Yeah.
That's an additional asymmetry.
And that actually might be just a sort of good response to this kind of thought experiment. Because what Beneto's trying to say is that most people would say no, and so crudely, it seems like the suffering kind of counts for more. But as so much of philosophy does, it kind of relies on intuitive, your sort of feeling of thought.
I have a sense of negativity bias and loss of
Another way he talks about, and crucially, this is only before you exist, right? Once you exist, your pleasure is good for you and your suffering is bad for you. But before you exist,
which is when other people have a choice about whether you do or don't.
Yeah, before you exist, for someone who doesn't exist, them not experiencing pleasure is not bad, but them not experiencing suffering is good. And so before you're born, the only moral calculus is the goodness that you're not suffering. And so that's all that should be taken into account. It's good that you're not suffering, let's not bring that into existence. Another sort of line of reasoning he goes down is a kind of like a rights-based approach, where he says, suppose, for example, that if I were to like break your arm, you would get an encyclopedic knowledge of philosophy or something. You might, if I gave you that option, you might think to yourself, like, you know what, I think that's worth it. Probably, it'd definitely be worth it for me. I'd take that. However, even if I would actually prefer that, if you didn't ask me first, if you just did it, like, you don't have the right to do that to me, right? If I found you in need of an ambulance and the only way to save your life somehow was to break your arm, then I think most people say you should do it. But if by causing you suffering, I can not save you from worse suffering, but bring you something good, most people think...
Skilled worker, level 6, continue. New mode. Long distance. Check jobs up to 650. Up to 1,000. Apply all. Yes. Okay. Jobs. Quick job. Let's do another job. Route length. 650, huh? France, Switzerland. Oh, sí, sí quiero. What is it? Oye, ya le cambié las opciones de las mirrors. Mirror quality high. Distance. Ultra. Vamos a poner high. Shadow quality high. Yes, for shadows, yes. Traffic headlights. 1,000. find out really quick how do I oh shit. Bueno, sí, también quiero instalar mods, pero a ver. Wait, what? Yeah. Dashboard map. A ver, antes de empezar.
ETS2 has been around for more than a decade, and yet, as of 2025, it's still expanding. With all the DLCs, controls, settings, hidden features and the constant updates that SES Software delivers, getting started can feel a little overwhelming. And that's why I've put together a two-part video, a complete beginners to advanced guide of this truck sim world. So let's get started and learn everything you need to master ETS2 from the ground up. Before we jump behind the wheel, let's start with the very first thing you'll see when launching ETS2, the profile creation screen. Here you'll build your in-game identity, choose a name, a company logo and your preferred truck brand. This doesn't lock you into one manufacturer, it just decides what you'll drive in the short tutorial job. Then pick up a starting city. This will be where your first garage is located later on, so choose a place where you'd like to return often. As soon as you confirm your starting city, the game drops you straight into the first job. It's a short route, but it introduces you to the most important elements, how the truck handles, how to follow the GPS, and how the delivery points work. There's no risk here, you can't lose money or damage your reputation, so take your time and just enjoy the learning feel of the truck. Once you've completed your first job, you'll officially receive your starter garage in the city you picked earlier. It's small, but it's your home base, and from here, the real game begins. And with the tutorial gone, you'll land in the main menu. At first, it might seem packed with options, but each tab has a clear purpose. Drive starts your next session. Job market, this is where all deliveries begin. Quick jobs, use company trucks and trailers, and it's perfect for starters because you don't need to own anything yet. Freight market becomes available once you own a truck. You use your own vehicle, but still company trailers. Cargo market unlocks after buying your first trailer. Now both the truck and the trailer are yours, and you can choose exactly what type of cargo you want to haul. There's also an external contracts tab for online World of Truck jobs that run in real time. For this, you'll have to create a World of Trucks profile. This is an online platform from ETS2 and ATS meant to get players together, tracking game achievements, participating in community events such as the current Halloween one. The truck dealer. This is where you'll end up spending most of your cash. It's where you buy your trucks. More brands will appear here as you explore the world around you. You'll find two markets here. Used trucks, which are cheaper, pre-configured, and often have a few 100,000 kilometers on the clock. They're a very good step if you're short on cash, but keep in mind they will have a higher maintenance cost. And of course the new trucks, which cost more, but you'll have the option to customize it yourself. No mileage and no maintenance worries for a while. Trailer dealer. Here you can purchase trailers of different types, flatbed, lowboys, tankers. Owning the right trailer gives you access to specialized cargo and your own jobs through the cargo market. And after I showed you where you can spend your money, you might be wondering how do you get money. Obviously you'll get money by completing jobs, but also you unlock emails from the bank as soon as you complete a few deliveries. The bank allows you to take a loan to expand faster. Maybe to buy your first truck or trailer. Your email will inform you about new truck dealers, recruitment agencies, and offers from the bank itself. The tab manager is maybe the most complex one. These tabs unlock gradually as you grow your company. Track manager lets you inspect, repair and upgrade owned trucks. Trailer manager allows you to store, modify and move trailers between garages. Driver manager is where you'll hire drivers once you have the extra trucks and garage slots. And garage manager will show you all your owned garages, their capacity and profitability. Recruitment agencies list drivers available for hire, each with their own skill levels and expected income. The world map will show you your explored roads, cities and discovered companies. You can set waypoints, check ferry routes and plan long distance journeys. The convoy mode, this is the built-in multiplayer feature. You can host or join sessions with friends, sharing the same weather, time and traffic conditions. The photo mode is an amazing feature. It needs no introduction, but still, it lets you pause the game, move the camera freely, adjust the depth of field and apply different filters to capture stunning shots. Soon you'll notice how everything connects: money, experience and company growth. You'll also notice it is not perfect, but it works, and it's worth understanding it clearly. Every completed job rewards money and experience points. Money funds your expansion, buying trucks, trailers and garages, while XP levels you up and unlocks skill points. Each skill specializes your career. Long distance increases route length, high value and fragile cargo offer riskier but better paying loads, just-in-time delivery gives you bonuses for urgent or express shipments, ADR certification unlocks hazardous materials and transport, eco driving slightly reduces the fuel consumption over time. So as you progress, you'll purchase your first truck, then your first trailer, and eventually expand to garages and hire drivers. Your employees complete deliveries while you're on the road or while you rest, generating passive income that steadily grows your company. The system might not be perfectly balanced, but it's simple and it gives you the freedom to build your trucking empire at your own pace. And now you know your way around the menu and you understand how the progression works. It's time to learn how to actually handle your truck. The controls and setup will play a big part of your driving experience. The game can be played using a keyboard, a mouse steering, a gamepad or a steering wheel with a shifter, whichever fits your setup best. Once that's configured, there are a few keybinds you'll want to familiarize yourself with. For the basic introduction, this is what I think you should always have assigned. We'll be sure to cover the advanced ones in the second video. Now these might not seem critical at first, but getting this right early on will make your life much easier down the road. At this point you have two options. You can start driving right away by taking a quick job, or if you're playing for the very first time, I'd recommend spending a little time in the Driving Academy mode. It's a dedicated mode designed to help you get comfortable with the game's handling, core mechanics before you take on real deliveries. Here you'll find short, structured scenarios that teach you how to reverse trailers, maneuver in tight spaces, couple and uncouple properly, and handle your truck under different conditions. The experience you gain here directly translates to the main game. Every skill, from smooth braking and wide turns to trailer positioning, will make your future deliveries easier, faster, and more realistic. If you're just starting out, taking the 15 or 20 minutes in the Driving Academy mode will save you hours of frustration later on. It's one of the best ways to build real confidence before taking on the open road. There are two basic routes you can take if you wish to enhance your experience a little. First, pay DLCs. ETS2 has a lot of them, and if you're new, it can get confusing on the Steam page, but it's actually simple. They come in different main types. The most important ones are map expansions, and they're the most expensive. They add entirely new regions like Scandinavia, Italy, Iberia once purchased. They connect the base map, but if they don't, you'll be able to fast travel there. If you only get one, next are realism and variety. There's also the more you have, the people for now. We're just gonna talk about the make sure to subscribe, buy them. There's one big rule of thumb you should always follow till you're ready for more advanced mods later on. The easiest and safest way to start is through the Steam Workshop. You can access directly from the game's main menu or through the Steam page itself. Browse the workshop and you'll find all kinds of mods. New truck skins, sound upgrades, traffic packs, better road textures. When you find something you like, simply click subscribe. Steam will automatically download and install it for you the next time you launch the game. And speaking of subscribing, if you made it this far into the video, thank you. Make sure to subscribe, leave a like, a comment maybe, it really helps the channel. Back in ETS2, you can go to the mod manager. Here you'll see all the mods you subscribe to. Just activate the ones you want by clicking the arrow to move them to the active list, then click to confirm changes to apply them. There's one big rule of thumb you should always follow when it comes to the load order. Some mods offer their own instructions. In general, however, this is the order you want to follow. And that's it. No file editing, no complicated installs. Start small. Maybe try a weather mode, a sound pack, or a realistic mirror tweak. Once you get comfortable, you can slowly explore the more advanced options later on. The workshop makes experimenting easy and safe, and it's one of the best ways to personalize your experience without breaking anything. And that wraps up the first part of the ETS2 Bible. By now you should have a solid foundation. If you found this helpful, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, it really helps me keep creating content like this. Just your first truck, then your first trailer, a basic introduction. The game can be played using a keyboard, a mouse steering, a gamepad, or a steering wheel with a shifter, whichever fits your setup best. Once that's configured, there are a few keybinds you'll want to familiarize yourself with. For a basic introduction,
D.
This is what I think you should always have assigned. We'll be sure to
Cruise control, look left. Zoom interior camera.
cover the advanced ones in the second video. Now these might not seem critical at first, but getting this right early on will make your life much easier down the road.
Yeah.
At this point you have two options. You can start driving right away by taking a quick job, or if you're playing for the very first time, I'd recommend spending a little time in the Driving Academy mode. It's a dedicated mode designed to help you get comfortable with the game's handling, core mechanics before you take on real.
Boys, I cannot believe this. Look, look, look. I am so excited. What's happening right now? I woke up to amazing news this morning. I can't wait to share this with you guys. Check this out. Yeah, what do you see? You see the truck on the map, and you see a blue line to where you need to go. Oh, you want more details about where to, where from? You want to see how much money? I know, I can't believe this. So excited. So let me get to it. Let me explain to you what's happening here. I want to give you all the information and show you how it's working. We're going to get going. If you don't mind, as always, I'm going to put the goofy cam on, right? You a goofy guy? I'm a goofy guy. Check this out, goofy guys. Hey, how you doing? Look at this. Sim dashboard. You've been great to me, but you got to go. Goodbye. Let's start the truck. So, you know, soon enough, we're going to get to remove that off the screen. That's the whole point, and that's what Nicholas was talking about. We will no longer need that on the screen and no longer need that. We just need to depend on this. But look, check this out. Side by side, boys. I cannot believe this. Look, look, look. I am so excited. What's happening right now? So anyways, let's get to driving. I'm going to try to float it on the screen somewhere here, maybe. In any case, I don't know. As we get to driving here, I want to talk to you about a couple things. So yeah, this is in alpha right now, which is not even beta, as I said. He is working on all of the details. He's got a long way to go. Only last night did he get American Truck Simulator working, and he wrote to me at 4 a.m. I haven't even washed my face. That's how quickly I came here to make this happen for you guys and let you know. So what he shared with me is that, yes, he has great aspirations for this app. I don't want to say for sure, but a portion of it could be for free, and a portion of it could be paid. And, you know, I'll be honest with you, we've been waiting for this for so long. I think this will be very much worth it. Let's give him a chance. Let's let him figure it out. But what he has shared on his Patreon page, and he's also shared this with me, he knows our community. He knows that we have varied interests and that we do all sorts of things. So he's going to work on adding pro mods. He's going to add all sorts of other support. So for example, this morning when I tried the app, it wasn't working. And I reached out, I was like, oh man, we're having slight issues this morning. And he goes, well, listen, no, I'm not supporting any mods right now. So please turn off any silly mods like real company names and all that. That's completely messing up the telemetry of the game. So as soon as I remove the mods, of course, everything worked flawlessly. But the point of all that is he is working on mod support because a lot of you do pro mods, a lot of you do map extensions and so on. If I didn't make this clear enough, this is supported for ATS and ETS both at this point. Yeah, so if you guys look at the top of the screen, he's also started to add information.
Hola, hola chavales y bienvenidos a un video tutorial de Euro Truck Simulator 2 y próximamente también estará para el American Truck Simulator. Un tutorial que os va a cambiar y os va a dejar guapísimo, guapísimo lo que es el Route Advisor, que es ni más ni menos que lo que aparece arriba en la pantalla. Y además también si le damos al F2 podemos sacar esos retrovisores tan pequeñitos ahí en la esquina, muy bien colocaditos, que no ocupan mucho, con ese marco especial también. Y bueno, también tenemos lo que sería pues el GPS, tenemos para cambiar las cargas, las entregas, la asistencia, el daño, los mensajes que tengamos, el chat de juego, porque si veis, ahí arriba a la derecha está puesto lo del chat, pero lo voy a poner aquí en el fondo oscuro para que sea mejor, porque este mod se puede usar en el online de SCS, es decir, se puede usar tanto en el single player como en el online de SCS como modo opcional, además, es decir, que en los servidores dedicados, por ejemplo, que tenemos nosotros, podéis entrar con este mod, porque...
We all spend hours in the graphics menu trying to get the game looking and feeling just right. But what if I told you the most powerful settings for maximum realism aren't in the settings menu at all? You've maxed out every graphic setting you can think of. You spent hours trying to get it right, but sometimes it still feels off. Your truck handles a little too perfectly. The shadows have the sharpness of a block of cheese, and the world just doesn't quite feel alive. What if the 5 biggest realism improvements aren't in a mod or a menu? They are actually hidden in a single text file, just waiting for you to flip the switch. This takes less than 2 minutes, and it will completely change how you see the road. Any future game updates never alter these tweaks. You don't need high-end graphic cards like an RTX 490, and if you can rename a file in Windows, you're already qualified. So let's begin. So before we start anything, you need to know where to find the file. So what you need to do is go into your Documents folder. From your Documents folder, you need to go into Euro Truck Simulator 2. And then once you're in there, you need to look a little bit further down and you'll see a file that says config, C-O-N-F-I-G. And then you need to open this up with something like Notepad. It would probably be the best option. Once you've done that, and you're looking at what just seems like a whole jumble of text, the first thing you need to do is CTRL, which is your control button, plus A if you're on Windows. And what we're going to do, we're going to copy all this text. Okay, so we're going to copy it. We're going to create a new folder, and we're going to call the new folder config backup, okay? Because we need to save this file. It's so important that we do that, because we never want to make an edit in here without doing a save. So we can always come back to it should something go a little bit wayward. So we're just basically saving our own bacon. So once you've done that, and you save the file and put it somewhere else on your computer, two are the biggest changes. Well, no, I can't say they're the biggest, but they are big changes. The first one we're going to do is the blurry shadows, and the second one we're going to do is the mirrors. Because you know, and I know, you're driving along, you look in your mirror and absolutely fine, and then all of a sudden there's 20 cars just magically appear, and you wonder, how did that happen? So starting with the shadows, open your config file, and what you need to do now is press CTRL, which is control again, and F, and this will bring up a search bar at the top. What I'm going to do, I'm going to put all this information into a Google document, which should be available in the video description for you. So starting off, we're going to put the first one we're going to put in is R, sun, shadow, texture, size. By default, this is probably set to maybe 2048 or 4096, but we want to get those razor sharp shadows. So to do this, we want to change the value to 8192. Perfect. Next, we're going to look at the mirrors. Now, as a real tracker, I need to see the traffic far behind me. It's just the way it is, not have it just appear. So what we need to do now is search for _mirror, _view, _distance, and crank that value up. Default should be pretty low, but I set mine to 300. Obviously, you can tweak this for your own personal benefit, but for me, I set mine at 300. This gives me a much more realistic view of the motorway behind me. One is one I've seen in forums and online sort of places, people requesting about the traffic. Now, if you want to take control of the traffic, you can do bits in game, but by doing it this way, you have total control. First thing you need to do is find the line which says G_traffic. The default generally is 1, but if you want quiet, relaxing, chilled out country roads, if you just want to have a nice cruise along, you can set this to something like 0.5. But if you want the chaos of a realistic rush hour, you can turn this up to maybe 3.5 or 4.0. But just before though, my friends, your computer might have a bit of a complaint. The higher you go, it does zip out a lot of power, the higher the number. You set space for averaging window length. Setting this to double your monitor's refresh rate can easily smooth out frame delivery and make your experience a lot smoother. For example, if you've got a 60Hz monitor, you change it to 120. If you've got a 180Hz monitor, you change it to 360, and so on. You get my drift. Quickly going off course a little bit. Going back to that Google document I mentioned earlier, I have put my entire in-game graphic settings in there as well, and also I put my personal config file, the one you see me using on screen. Now you can either use this as a guide or just copy it over. It is your choice at the end of the day, and it is my gift to you for supporting the channel. And if you want to thank me back, then feel free to give me a digital handshake and hit that like button. It costs nothing, but it does tell YouTube you're getting something from the video, and it does help our channel grow a lot more, which is awesome. The next two changes we're going to make, you've probably done this bit, but for those who haven't, it's worth you noticing that what you need to do is unlock the game secret toolkit. This is for anyone who loves taking screenshots, or if you want a full control over your simulation, go into enable the developer tools. You need to change two lines. First, you need to find G_developer and change the 0 to a 1. Then find G_console and change this from 0 to a number 1 as well. Now what this does, obviously it's incredible, but it does some things that really help you out, because it unlocks the developer camera. All you need to do is just press 0 on your number pad, and you can fly anywhere with a mouse and your numpad using certain keys. And I use this just to get myself out of sticky situations. For example, when the road disappears in front of you because of a bug in game. It's happened to me before, but by using the developer tool, I got out of the situation and got on with my game. The next one, it gives you access to the developer console. To do this, you press the tittle key. That's basically the little squiggly line next to number 1 on your keyboard, and you get this command window, which can seem a bit daunting. But as long as you kind of make a note of these commands, and there are many videos on YouTube that do explain it. The first one, and the one I use a lot, is G_set_time followed by a number like 15. Using the 24-hour clock, that would mean 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Basically, what it does, it means I can jump forward if I need to in-game for whatever reason. Now, there are another 30-something tweaks to do, and obviously I'm not going to torment you by going through every single one by one. We've made our shadows sharper, our mirrors more realistic, and taking control of traffic. We've also unlocked the developer camera and the console for the developer. But like we said, I'm not going to put you through that pain. Everything you need is in the Google document. You know how to find it. You know how to search for the actual lines. Just go and have some fun with it. Enjoy it. But please, 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 don't forget to make a copy of your config file, just in case you need to go back there for whatever reason. For you NVIDIA users, a quick trip to the NVIDIA control panel, or if you're on an AMD, you'll have very similar options. If you need to know where to find it, go to your desktop, right-click on your mouse, go to Show More Options, click on that, and then you'll see the option for the NVIDIA control panel, or the AMD. The first thing we need to change is the texture filtering. The negative LOD bias, change this to clamp. This one is huge for reducing that annoying shimmering on things like fences, rails, anything that shines, basically. The next one we want to do is the texture filtering. Now, we want to set this to high quality. And the third and final one we want to do is the trill near optimization. Make sure you turn this off. Once you've done that, you need to give your PC a restart, and you should see noticeable sharper textures in the game straight away. In the meantime, thank you for watching and have a great day.
I feel like I've been left out.
Well, we admire all.
We all spend hours in the graphics menu trying to get the game looking. Textures in the game. There's a mod that 81,000 truckers have installed in ETS2, and almost none of them have ever heard it say a single word. There's a good chance it's sitting silent in your mod list right now. I dug into the download numbers and found out why, and it's not because the mod's broken. The fix takes about 30 seconds, and once you've done it, it changes how the whole game feels.
The point of payment for travel. Slow down the speed.
So in this one, why your radar detector has never spoken, the 30-second fix that wakes it up, and a second free tool that means you almost never pay a speeding fine again. The radar detector is one of the most downloaded utility mods in the game. It calls out speed cameras, average speed zones, toll stations, weighbridges, roadworks out loud, like a real unit on your dash. It's the kind of mod that wakes the game up. Instead of driving down a silent road, your cab talks to you and gives you the heads up. But here's the thing, it ships with no voice. And when you check the numbers, 81,000 downloads on this mod. But here's the weird thing, only about 800 have downloaded the English voice pack. That means there are potentially tens of thousands of people driving around with a completely silent speed camera warning system in their mod list doing absolutely nothing. Or they just delete it because they think it didn't work. It's not broken, it's just muted. Nobody told them there's a second part to install. So if that's you maybe, grab the voice pack, it's a separate download on the same page, drop it in your mod folder and load it above your main radar mod. That's it, 30 seconds.
Railway crossing.
Voice pack on top, radar underneath, fire at the game, and suddenly everything wakes up. That's the mod that warns you about the cameras, but warnings only help if your truck actually reacts in time. Now there is a free plugin, it's not a mod, it's a plugin, that does handle that part for you if you want to drive smarter. Cruise control. Yes, cruise control is probably the least exciting feature in ETS2, and ironically is one you use the most, but it does have one flaw that costs you money every single time you drive. Think about it. You're cruising at 90, the limit drops to 50, and it drops fast. Right before a village or a speed camera, your cruise control doesn't care if it holds you at 90 as you tear through a village. And it's not you being careless. The game gives you about 2 seconds of warning, and by the time you reacted, you get a fine. The intelligent cruise control plugin fixes exactly that. What makes it different is it actually reads the road signs. Say a sign says 50, then your truck eases down to 50. If a sign says 90, your truck will wind back up to 90. You set it once, at whatever low speed, 50 for example, and no more surprise fines. No more stabbing the brake at the last second, the moment you see a police car or a camera. The two together, and you've basically got a modern driver assistant setup in-game. At the end of the day, every euro, every pound, every dollar you lose in fines is money off your profit, and both of these are free. So take a couple of minutes to set it up before you play next. The radar detector calls the cameras, the cruise control makes sure you never speed in past one, your cab talks, truck thinks, and fines stop. Trucker out. If you've ever spent a whole evening dragging mods up and down a list, launched the game and watched it crash to your desktop, this is the app that ends that.
Now I have both set up. I've got the two devices here. Now, if you're running anything other than Android, meaning if you're using iPhone or whatever it may be, this won't work. So do not watch any further unless you plan on getting yourself some cheap Android tablets.
Estoy aquí en pantalla.
Boys, I cannot believe this. Look.
Here's the new ChatGPT. Work, what? Upgrade now. No, thank you. Hey, can you confirm how do I set up a to my map to either display on the dashboard if the truck has it on the Euro Truck Simulator 2, or like enable it in the widget so that it shows me the job route. I think I disabled it, or I'm not sure if it never was available. Can you remind me? Or show me. F3, Michael, F5, F3, a ver.
Yep. I checked the current-ish controls because ETS2 has apparently decided that GPS on dashboard deserves its own terminology labyrinth. There are two different GPS map displays you're probably thinking of. 1. The normal on-screen route advisor. While driving, F3 equals toggle the route advisor on-off. F5, cycle its map zoom levels. The route advisor is the overlay that normally appears in the lower right area of the screen and shows your red route, upcoming turns, distance, ETA, etc. So if you've somehow hidden that, hit F3. Number 2, the GPS built into the truck's dashboard. This is the one you're asking about, I think. Not every truck interior has a functional built-in GPS. Some require an exclusive interior cab configuration. If your truck does have the dashboard GPS, go to Options, Keys and Buttons. Then look for Infotainment Display Mode. Assign that to a key button. That controls the dashboard's infotainment navigation display, including turning the built-in GPS on-off. In recent versions, this is the control people are using for the dashboard GPS. There's also Navigation Zoom Mode that lets you change the zoom level of the dashboard GPS. It is separate from F5, which controls the on-screen route advisor's zoom. So, for what you're trying to do. If you want to drive inside the cab and have the route displayed on the truck's actual GPS screen, 1. Get into the truck. 2. Look at the dashboard and see whether it has a navigation screen. 3. Go Go to Options, Keys and Buttons. 4. Find Infotainment Display Mode. 5. Bind it to something convenient. 6. Press that key while driving. 7. If necessary, bind Navigation Zoom Mode separately to adjust the map. If the dashboard screen doesn't show a map at all, don't immediately assume you've disabled it. Your particular truck's interior may simply not have the integrated GPS. And if what you really want is simply the route visible while driving, without having the big Route Advisor overlay taking up screen space, that's a slightly different setup. The dashboard GPS is actually a pretty nice solution for that, especially if you're trying to keep the cockpit view immersive.
Change career? Hold on. Workshop. Okay.
Think that I don't have